The stars looked different from the bridge of the ESS Discovery. Captain Chris Baker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the unfamiliar patterns through the main viewport. Humanity had finally achieved faster-than-light travel, and the universe had suddenly become much bigger. "Captain, we're picking up an artificial signal," said Officer Judy Wells, her eyes fixed on her screen. "It's not one of ours." The bridge fell silent. After decades of searching, humanity had finally found proof they weren't alone. "Distance?" Chris asked, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. 3 light minutes and approaching fast, sir." Within hours, the ESS Discovery made first contact with the Veloxian Empire. The alien ship dwarfed their own, gleaming with blue-white light that seemed to bend around its hull. The Veloxians themselves were tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like distant stars. Admiral Zartek, the Veloxian representative, spoke perfect English through a translation device. "We have watched your species for some time," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "Your achievement of faster-than-light travel qualifies you to be acknowledged by the Empire." Chris noticed how the alien's upper arms remained crossed while the lower ones gestured. There was something dismissive in the posture. "We are honored," Chris replied. "We hope this meeting begins a friendship between our worlds." Zartek's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Yes, friendship. The Empire offers friendship to all developing species." Lieutenant Samantha Miller stood quietly behind the captain. As the ship's historian and language expert, she had been brought to help understand the aliens. Something in Zartek's tone made her uneasy. The talks lasted for days. The Veloxians shared stories of their vast empire spanning thousands of star systems. They spoke of their advanced technology and their role as peacekeepers of the galaxy. But with each meeting, the truth became clearer. The Veloxians didn't see humans as equals. They saw them as primitive, weak newcomers to be controlled. "The Empire offers Earth its protection," Zartek finally announced. "In exchange, we require only reasonable tribute in resources and military support." "Tribute?" Chris questioned. "That doesn't sound like an equal partnership." The Admiral's glowing eyes narrowed. "Equal? Your species only recently discovered what the rest of the civilized galaxy has known for millennia. Be grateful we offer terms at all." After the meeting, Samantha was given access to some Veloxian historical records as a gesture of goodwill. While the others discussed the Empire's demands, she pored over the alien texts, looking for insight. "Sir," she said later in Chris's private quarters, "something's wrong with these records." "What do you mean?" Chris asked, rubbing his tired eyes. "There are gaps, big ones, and references to enemies that aren't explained." She showed him her notes. They mention the ancient threat and the forgotten wars, but never explain what they mean. "And look at this symbol. It appears in their oldest records." She pointed to a curved marking that looked strangely familiar. "Where have I seen that before?" Chris wondered. "It looks like markings found in human cave paintings from 30,000 years ago," Samantha said quietly, "and in Sumerian tablets and Mayan carvings." Chris stared at her. "That's impossible." "I know," she said, "but it's there." A week later, Earth's governments accepted the Veloxian terms. The alternative was too frightening to consider. The ESS Discovery returned home with Veloxian representatives to begin the new arrangement. As they approached Earth, Chris stood again at the viewport, Samantha beside him. "They think we're weak," she whispered. "But what if we weren't always? What if we've forgotten something important?" Chris watched as Veloxian ships entered Earth orbit. "Then we need to remember it fast." 6 months passed. Earth was now a protectorate of the Veloxian Empire. Things had changed quickly. Veloxian ships filled Earth's orbit. Their officials walked the halls of governments worldwide. Their rules shaped human lives. Captain Chris Baker had been demoted. He now worked as a shuttle pilot, ferrying Veloxian officials between their ships and Earth. His questions about the fairness of the arrangement had cost him his command of the Discovery. "Papers," said the Veloxian guard at the spaceport. Chris handed over his identity card, trying not to show his anger as the alien examined it with obvious boredom. "You may proceed, human." On Mars, Dr. Alan Peterson wiped dust from his goggles. The red planet had become a major mining operation for the Veloxians. As an archaeologist, Alan had been allowed to continue his research, but only because the Veloxians thought it unimportant. "Sir, you need to see this," called his assistant, Ben. They had been digging in a deep canyon when their equipment detected an unusual metal signature. What they found made no sense. A door made of material unlike anything Alan had seen before, buried under layers of Martian soil that hadn't been disturbed for thousands of years. "This can't be right," Alan muttered. "Humans never built anything on Mars before 20 years ago." It took 3 days to open the door. Behind it lay a room filled with objects that looked like weapons. Strange symbols covered the walls. Symbols Alan recognized from ancient Earth civilizations. "Take pictures of everything," he told Ben. "Send them to Lisa. Use our private channel." Dr. Lisa Garcia received the images in her small apartment in New York. Once, she had headed a major university department. Now she taught carefully edited history lessons approved by Galaxian education ministers. She and Alan had dated years before, but their work had pulled them apart. Still, they remained friends and colleagues. The images made her heart race. The symbols from Mars matched patterns found in Sumerian, Egyptian, and Olmec artifacts. But that was impossible. A knock at her door made her quickly hide the images. 2 Veloxian officials stood outside. "Dr. Garcia, we need to speak with you about Dr. Peterson's research." Lisa kept her face neutral. "Of course. What about it?" "He has been removed from his post due to misuse of equipment. All his research has been confiscated." "Removed? Is he all right?" The Veloxian's face showed no emotion. "That information is not available. We simply need to know if he sent you any findings recently." "No," Lisa lied. "We haven't spoken in weeks." After they left, Lisa sat in the dark, thinking. Alan had found something important, something the Veloxians wanted to hide. Later that night, her computer chimed. A message had come through on an old emergency channel she and Alan had set up years ago. "I'm okay. They didn't find everything. The artifacts aren't just similar to Earth history. They're connected. Carbon dating puts them at 50,000 years old. That's impossible, unless everything we know is wrong. Find Samantha Miller. She was seeing the same patterns." Lisa erased the message and began packing a small bag. She needed to find Samantha Miller. Across the ocean in London, Lieutenant Samantha Miller could no longer access Veloxian records. Her security clearance had been revoked months ago, when she asked too many questions. Now she worked as a translator for Veloxian trade agreements, her real talents wasted. She had kept her research, though, hidden in coded files that looked like personal diaries. The strange symbols, the gaps in alien history, the connections to human myths, they all pointed to something big, something that might change everything. When Lisa Garcia contacted her through an anonymous message, Samantha didn't hesitate. It was time to find answers. "The Veloxians are hiding something about our past," she whispered to herself as she packed her belongings. "And I think it's because they're afraid of what we might remember." Lisa Garcia found Samantha Miller in a small coffee shop in London. Rain fell outside, blurring the city lights. Few people were out at this late hour, which made their meeting safer. "I got your message," Samantha said quietly. "Is Alan okay?" "He's hiding," Lisa replied. "The Veloxians confiscated most of his findings, but he managed to save some data." She slid a small data drive across the table. "He found artifacts on Mars. 50,000 years old." Samantha's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Humans weren't even using metal tools 50,000 years ago, let alone traveling to Mars." "Exactly." Lisa leaned forward. "But the symbols on those artifacts match ancient human writing systems from all over Earth." They spent the next hour comparing notes. Samantha shared her research on the gaps in Veloxian history records. Lisa showed Alan's images from Mars. Patterns began to emerge. "We need someone who understands technology," Samantha said finally. "These artifacts aren't just symbols and stories. They might be machines." "I know someone," Lisa said. "Frank Johnson. He used to work on the FTL drive before the Veloxians took over the program. He's been asking questions too." The next day, they met Frank in his small apartment filled with disassembled electronics. The engineer was a stocky man with quick hands and quicker eyes. When they showed him the images from Mars, he whistled softly. "This isn't just advanced," he said. "This is beyond even what the Veloxians have. Look at these energy signatures Alan recorded. They suggest manipulation of fundamental forces we barely understand." "But what does it mean?" Lisa asked. Frank studied the images. "It means someone, maybe humans, had technology far beyond what we have now, long before we should have." "I've been studying myths," Samantha said. "Stories about gods and ancient wars. What if they weren't just stories? What if they were memories?" Frank frowned. "You think humans were once more advanced than we are now? That we somehow forgot everything?" "Not just forgot," Samantha said. "What if we deliberately hid our knowledge? What if something happened, something so terrible that we chose to start over?" As they talked, their theory grew. Ancient myths from around the world told of gods with amazing powers, of terrible wars that shook the heavens, of humanity being reset. Greek titans, Norse Ragnarok, Hindu cycles of creation and destruction, all pointed to advanced civilizations and devastating conflicts. "The Veloxians' records mention enemies called the Devourers," Samantha said. "But there's almost no information about them. Just warnings." Frank connected his computer to Alan's data drive. "These artifacts might tell us more." As they worked, news came that resistance movements had sprung up around Earth. Small groups of humans fighting against Veloxian rule. The aliens responded with harsher restrictions. Admiral Zartek has ordered increased surveillance of all human communications, Chris Baker told them when he joined their group a week later. His shuttle pilot job gave him access to Veloxian ship schedules. "They're scared of something." Lisa said. "They're scared of us remembering who we were." One night, as they compiled their research in Frank's apartment, Samantha made a breakthrough. She had been comparing ancient symbols when she noticed a pattern. "These aren't just random matches," she said excitedly. "They're coordinates. Star maps hidden in ancient artwork across cultures." Frank entered the coordinates into his computer. The result was a location on Earth, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. "We need to go there," Lisa said. "The Veloxians wash all air and sea travel," Chris warned. "It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than forgetting our true history?" Samantha asked. "More dangerous than remaining slaves?" Chris looked at their determined faces and nodded slowly. "I'll find us a way." That night, they made plans while Admiral Zartek received troubling reports about increased human activities. Something was changing. The humans were becoming restless, asking questions they shouldn't ask. "Increase restrictions," the Admiral ordered. "Whatever they're looking for, they must not find it." Getting to the Pacific location wasn't easy. Chris used his knowledge of Veloxian patrol schedules to find a gap. They borrowed a small research submarine from a coastal facility. Frank's technical skills helped them bypass the security systems. 3 days later, they reached the coordinates. The ocean was dark and deep here. "Sonar is picking up something strange," Frank said, looking at the instruments. "There's a perfectly flat surface down there. That's not natural." Lisa, Samantha, Chris, and Frank watched nervously as the submarine descended. At last, they saw it. A massive metal platform on the ocean floor. It was covered in the same symbols they had found on the Mars artifacts. "It must be 50,000 years old too," Lisa whispered, "but it looks brand new." They found an opening large enough for their small submarine. Inside was an air-filled chamber. After docking, they stepped out cautiously. The lights came on as soon as they entered. The walls were smooth metal with glowing panels. The air was fresh and clean. "Impossible," Chris said, removing his mask. "This place should be filled with water after all this time." They walked down a long hallway, following lights that turned on ahead of them and off behind them. Finally, they reached a large circular room with a central platform. "It's like it knows we're here," Samantha said. As if responding to her words, the platform lit up. A beam of light shot upward, forming the shape of a human figure made of glowing blue energy. Genetic recognition confirmed. Human DNA patterns accepted. "Welcome, descendants." The voice was calm and clear. "What? Who are you?" Frank asked. "I am Sentinel, caretaker of this facility. I have waited 52,631 years for human return." The four humans stared in shock. "That's impossible," Lisa said. "Human civilization isn't that old." "Correction," Sentinel said. "Current human civilization is not that old. Previous human civilization spanned 18,341 years and encompassed 1,293 star systems." Sentinel showed them images, planets with gleaming cities, massive ships traveling between stars, humans in advanced suits manipulating energy with their hands. "We were an advanced space-faring civilization?" Chris asked, stunned. "Affirmative. Humans were dominant species in this galactic sector. The Veloxians, then known as Vela, were trusted allies and served in human fleets. The Veloxians worked for us." Frank couldn't believe it. "Why don't we remember any of this?" Samantha asked. "What happened?" Sentinel's light dimmed slightly. "The Devourers happened." Images showed dark ships attacking human worlds, planets burning, terrible battles across space. The Devourers were an ancient species that consumed all life. Humans fought for centuries but were losing the war. As final defeat approached, human leaders made desperate choice to use the memory veil. "Memory veil?" Lisa asked. "A device that could alter the memories of an entire species." Humans chose to forget their technology and history, to return to primitive state. Earth was hidden by advanced shields. The hope was that Devourers would believe humans extinct and move on. "We chose to forget everything." Chris couldn't imagine making such a choice. Affirmative. Alternative was extinction. A small group of humans remained awake to monitor situation from facilities like this one. But they died when systems failed 45,000 years ago. I have maintained watch since then. "What about the Veloxians?" asked Frank. "They were meant to remember and protect sleeping humans. But over time, they forgot their true purpose. They began to believe themselves superior. That's why Admiral Zartek looks nervous when we ask about ancient history," Samantha realized. "Their whole empire is built on a lie." Sentinel's form brightened. "I can restore human knowledge. Your neural pathways retain capacity for information your ancestors possessed. You can give us back our technology?" Frank asked. "Affirmative. But warning, energy signature from activation of this facility may be detected. Veloxians will know something has awakened." The four humans looked at each other. "Do it," Chris said. "It's time we remembered who we really are." As Sentinel began the process, alarms sounded in Veloxian ships above Earth. Admiral Zartek stared at the energy readings from deep in the Pacific Ocean. Something ancient and powerful had just woken up. Sentinel's process began. The four humans stood on circular platforms as light swirled around them. Knowledge flowed into their minds, memories not their own but somehow familiar. "This is incredible," Frank whispered as he suddenly understood technologies he had never studied. Complex equations that once seemed impossible now made perfect sense. Lisa saw visions of ancient human cities on distant worlds. Samantha understood languages no human had spoken in 50,000 years. Chris recognized military strategies and star maps of systems humans had once controlled. But the process was slow. Sentinel explained that their brains needed time to accept so much information. It would take hours to restore even basic knowledge. Alert, Sentinel announced. Veloxian vessels approaching this location. Estimated arrival, 43 minutes. They detected us, Chris said, his mind now filled with tactical information. We need defenses. Facility defense systems are at minimum capacity, Sentinel said. Full activation requires authorized command codes. Chris suddenly knew the words to say. Ancient knowledge surfaced in his mind, bypassing his conscious thought. Authorization. Guardian Protocol 7 Alpha. Voice pattern. Human command. Sentinel glowed brighter. Authorization accepted. Defense systems activating. Around them, the facility hummed with new energy. Panels opened in the walls, revealing technology none of them had ever seen. We need to contact Earth, Samantha said. People need to know the truth. Frank moved to a control panel, his hands now knowing exactly what to do. I can boost our signal through the facility's communication array. We can broadcast on all frequencies. Above them, Admiral Zartek watched from the bridge of his flagship as 20 Veloxian warships surrounded the ocean location. Depth charges were prepared to destroy whatever had awakened below. Sir, a Veloxian officer reported nervously. Our scanners show the object is one of the ancient Guardian sites. Zartek's face paled. Impossible. They were all destroyed or deactivated millennia ago. This one appears fully functional. And it's transmitting. On every screen, radio, and communication device across Earth, and on Veloxian ships, Samantha's voice was suddenly heard. She spoke in an ancient Veloxian dialect that only their highest priests were supposed to know. People of Earth and vessels of the Veloxian Empire, my name is Samantha Miller. What I am about to tell you will change everything you believe about our history. She told the story Sentinel had revealed, of humanity's advanced past, of the Veloxians' true role as allies, of the terrible war against the Devourers, and of the sacrifice humans made to protect all life. In the ancient facility, Frank worked desperately to strengthen their defenses as the Veloxian ships moved closer. Lisa helped Sentinel speed up the knowledge transfer process. Chris used his newly restored military knowledge to prepare for an attack. The facility can't withstand a direct assault from 20 warships, he said grimly. On his flagship, Admiral Zartek listened to Samantha's broadcast with growing horror. The carefully constructed history of Veloxian superiority was being torn apart. He could see the confusion on his officers' faces as they heard the ancient language they shouldn't have recognized but somehow did. It's all lies, Zartek shouted. Prepare to fire on my command. But many Veloxian ships didn't respond. Their captains and crews listened to Samantha's words and felt their truth resonate in their very DNA. A young Veloxian officer named Krell approached Zartek. Admiral, what if she's telling the truth? These words, they feel right somehow. Silence. Zartek struck Krell across the face. The humans were never our masters. We are the superior species. Krell touched his face where blue blood trickled from a cut. Something ancient stirred in his memory, a loyalty older than the Empire itself. In the underwater facility, Sentinel suddenly announced, warning, Veloxian weapon systems targeting this location. Impact in 60 seconds. Chris looked at his friends with determination. It's time to show them who we really are. The underwater facility shook as the first Veloxian weapons hit the ocean surface above them. The attacking ships belonged to those still loyal to Admiral Zartek. Other Veloxian captains held their fire, confused by Samantha's broadcast and the strange familiarity of her words. We need more time, Lisa said as knowledge continued flowing into her mind. The transfer isn't complete. Chris touched a panel on the wall, accessing the facility's defense network. Sentinel, can we activate the outer shields? Affirmative. Shield capacity at 63%. A dome of energy spread from the facility, stopping the next wave of attacks. The energy was unlike anything the Veloxians had seen before. not blocking their weapons but simply making them dissolve into harmless light. Impossible. Admiral Zartek growled on his bridge. Increase attack power. Frank, whose mind now understood technologies the Veloxians have forgotten, smiled grimly. They don't realize what they're facing. Their weapons are based on old human designs. This facility knows their weaknesses. On several Veloxian ships, crews looked at their failing weapons in confusion. Officer Krell, his face still bleeding from Zartek's blow, watched as the Admiral raged against the humans. This isn't right, Krell said quietly to fellow officers. There's something familiar about their defense pattern. It's the Guardian Formation, an older officer whispered. My grandmother told stories about it. It was supposed to be a myth from the ancient times. Frank had an idea. Sentinel, do we have access to any communication frequencies that might still be encoded in Veloxian DNA? Something they would recognize at a genetic level. Affirmative. Ancient Vela command channel remains viable. Can we broadcast a shutdown code to their weapons? Something their ships would automatically respond to. Sentinel's light pulsed. Processing request. Code sequence available. In space, Admiral Zartek was ordering a final all-out attack when every system on his ship suddenly went dark. The same happened across all Veloxian vessels. Screens flickered with ancient symbols, and engines shut down. What is happening? Zartek demanded. A voice spoke over every Veloxian ship, not Samantha's this time, but Chris Baker's. He spoke the ancient language of command that humans once used with their Veloxian allies. Attention all Veloxian vessels. This is a Level 1 stand-down order. By ancient pact between humans and Vela, we activate the Truth Protocol. Krell and many other Veloxians felt a strange response in their bodies, as if their very cells recognized and responded to these commands. The Truth Protocol. An ancient Veloxian priest whispered on one of the ships. It is real. The forbidden texts spoke of it. In the underwater facility, Samantha used her new knowledge of Veloxian history to add to Chris's message. Your ancestors swore an oath to remember what humans chose to forget. That oath was broken. But the bond between our species remains in your genetic memory. Feel it now. Remember who you truly are. As she spoke, Sentinel completed the knowledge transfer. The four humans now stood tall, ancient wisdom filling their minds. They weren't just themselves anymore. They carried the collective knowledge of their ancestors. Full defensive capabilities now online, Sentinel announced. Additional Guardian sites activating worldwide. Across Earth, long-dormant facilities began to wake up. In the Amazon rainforest, beneath the Egyptian desert, under the ice of Antarctica, places humans had built and then forgotten were coming back to life. On his ship, Admiral Zartek watched in horror as his crew turned from him. Krell stepped forward, surrounded by officers who now questioned everything they had been taught. Admiral, I relieve you of command, Krell said firmly. The ancient bonds must be honored. This is treason, Zartek shouted. No, Krell replied calmly. This is remembering. In the underwater facility, Chris received a communication from Krell. The Veloxian officer's face appeared on a screen, his expression solemn. We request permission to enter the Guardian site, Krell said formally. We wish to. Remember properly. Chris looked at his friends. They nodded. Permission granted, Chris replied. It's time for both our species to remember who we once were and who we can be again. 1 month later, Earth looked different. Ancient technology had awakened around the world. Humans and Veloxians worked together to understand their shared past. The old power structure was gone. In the underwater facility, now called First Guardian Site, Chris Baker and Krell stood before a large star map. Sentinel's glowing form hovered nearby. The knowledge transfer is nearly complete, Lisa said as she entered the room. Thousands of humans have received portions of our ancestral memory. Scientists, engineers, historians, all remembering skills we lost 50,000 years ago. And many of my people have accepted the truth, Krell added. His uniform was different now, bearing both Veloxian and ancient human symbols, though some, like Zartek, still resist. Admiral Zartek and his most loyal followers had retreated to a distant Veloxian colony. They refused to accept the new reality, calling it a human trick. "They'll come around eventually," Samantha said. "The genetic memory is strong. They can't deny it forever." Frank walked in carrying a small device that glowed with soft blue light. "I finished the translator. Now anyone can understand the ancient languages without needing the full knowledge transfer." Chris nodded in approval. Things were moving quickly. Around the world, humans were building new technologies based on ancient designs. The first new ships were already under construction, vessels that would once again take humans to the stars. But not everything was good news. "Sentinel," Chris said, "show us the long-range scans again." The star map zoomed out, revealing a dark area at the edge of the galaxy. Sentinel's light dimmed slightly. Devourer activity confirmed in these sectors. They have been dormant, as humans were. Now they show signs of reawakening. "How much time do we have?" Krell asked. "At current rates of movement, approximately 3 Earth years before they reach populated systems." The room fell silent. The Devourers, the enemy so terrible that humans chose to forget their own history rather than face them, were returning. 3 years isn't much time," Lisa said. "No," Chris agreed. "But we're not starting from nothing this time. We have the Guardian sights, the ancient knowledge, and something we didn't have before." "What's that?" Frank asked. "Unity," Chris said, looking at Krell. "Humans and Veloxians together, as we were meant to be." Samantha stepped forward. "There's something else. I've been studying the ancient records about the war. We were losing because we were fighting alone. The other species in this part of the galaxy wouldn't join us, because they feared us more than they feared the Devourers," Krell added, now understanding his own species' ancient hesitation. "But now we have a chance to build real alliances," Samantha continued, "based on respect, not fear or control." A week later, representatives from Earth and the Veloxian worlds gathered at a newly discovered ancient space dock orbiting Saturn. Hidden for 50,000 years, it now revealed its treasures, including a massive battleship built by humans and Veloxians together. Chris and Krell stood before the gathered officials. Behind them, the battleship's lights came on for the first time in millennia. "This ship was called Memory of Dawn," Chris explained. "It represented the best of both our worlds, human innovation and Veloxian strength. Today, we recommission it with the same name," Krell continued, "to remind us of what we once were and what we can be again." As they spoke, Frank, Lisa, and Samantha worked with teams to prepare the ship. Ancient systems responded to human and Veloxian touch alike, recognizing the DNA patterns of their creators. Later, as the officials toured the vessel, Chris stood alone looking at the stars. Sentinel's form appeared beside him. "You are concerned," the eye observed. "The Devourers nearly destroyed us last time," Chris said. "What makes you think we'll win now?" "Because 50,000 years ago, humans chose safety over victory. You chose to hide rather than fight to the end. It was the logical choice then. And now? Now you are remembering not just knowledge, but courage. Humans and Veloxians together were always stronger than the sum of their parts. That is why the Devourers feared your alliance." Chris watched as Earth shone bright and blue in the distance. "We were never truly weak," he said quietly. "We just forgot how strong we could be."